Hi everyone, this is Jim Tolles, and for this video I want to talk about what a spiritual teacher is. I think that term unfortunately has gotten a bad rap because of a lot of abuse that other people have done in the name of being a spiritual teacher, a priest, an imam, a rabbi, whatever the term is, and whoever it was and whatever they happened to do that was really not in integrity. There have been plenty of people that have abused their powers, making people do things or give money or whatnot, and not have used that wealth and that power appropriately. And so that's a scary term for a lot of people. But let's step away from those kind of outliers because there have been plenty of spiritual teachers who have done wonderful things and have cared for the people that they've chosen to care for and the spiritual lineage that they've chosen. Essentially, a spiritual teacher is helping you, find your truth, find what you already know. The true spiritual teacher understands that your greatest gifts and your greatest knowledge and your greatest love is always right inside of you. It's not someplace else. It's not something you need to go to get help. Although that kind of idea can be helpful at certain times. Going to God and praying to God, that's a wonderful thing to do. But ultimately, God is in everything. And God wants you just to be you and to be loved. And God is in you, and God is in me, and God is in all things. And understanding that is an important piece. And I hope you've watched my What is God video before coming to this because I'm using that term in a certain way. But a spiritual teacher is not trying to force you to do something. It's not using fear or control to make you believe any specific different way. And it's not a penalized sort of situation where, like, if you don't follow the teacher, then you're wrong and something bad is going to happen to you, which is another situation that's set up way too much around spiritual teachers. That is not the idea. The idea is not the spiritual teachers walking around with a ruler to reprimand you for doing something wrong. In fact, if a spiritual teacher is caught up in that lineage, they really are a little lost because that's not the idea. The idea is that we're helping people unlock their spirit so they can follow their true hearts, right? To follow the path of their soul, wherever that leads them. And that ultimately is usually leading towards love. It becomes so simple. Love and truth and beauty, helping each other, compassion, generosity. As I said, it's not about reprimanding people for doing something that's wrong. And there are all types of spiritual teachers. This is one way where I really have a much broader view of the spiritual teacher because certain types are good at certain things. And I think that's another important piece for those of you who are building your path to appreciate that spiritual teachers aren't one-stop shops. Some of them are, and those are very special people. But a lot of them really are kind of focused on core ways. So some really kind of focus on the world of the mind and how they talk about it and how they help you to see through God's eyes and to see through your eyes, more clearly. And they help you find tools to be clear in your head. So meditation, to some degrees, prayer can be wonderful. Reading spiritual texts and those types of things, they'll be really good at that. That's what that spiritual teacher does, is show you those ways of opening that mind and opening that vision and clearing the clouds. Opening your self-expression, maybe another way. And so those can be very intellectual and mind-based spiritual teachers. And you can tell by how they talk to you and where they're coming from. Those who teach from their hearts, they can be doing pretty much anything. They may not even consider themselves spiritual teachers, but you'll know. It could be the wonderful woman working at the Humane Society. You can tell just like how much care and compassion she's bringing into this job. And just being around her is teaching you about care and compassion and living through your heart. And that's a very special thing. And unfortunately, I think the heart gets kind of forgotten far too often. And some people, they'll talk about the heart, and they're coming from the space of the head to talk about their hearts, how you should live from your heart. And you can feel that difference. You can feel when somebody's thinking about love. And love doesn't think like that. It feels, it moves through emotion. And then there's spiritual teachers for the body. And the body often is like this evil thing that we're trying to get away from. And there have been a lot of ascetic practices and different religious traditions for a long time where it's like if we beat up the body enough, somehow we're going to be more transcendent, which is a horrible idea. Spirituality embraces everything. It embraces all of us. It doesn't say that this part is bad and this part is good. That is getting really, really lost into duality. As I mentioned in one of my other videos, I do talk about the difference between higher truth, where all is one, and truth of the moment, where some things are spiritual and some things are not. But I use that very, very lightly, right? It's more like, murdering somebody is not spiritual, helping somebody is spiritual, that type of thing. When you start to apply that to your body, where you're trying to say that there's some part that you have to kind of cut out or isn't as good as the rest, then you've lost it. You've gotten lost in duality again, and you lost in the illusion of duality. Part of awakening makes it very clear what is spirituality and love and what is really acting in that higher good, even though ultimately everything is part of the divine plan, and that's why we have to accept everything. And so starting with your body is a great place to start, with accepting everything. Accept everything about your body, about how you look, how it is, what it wants, what it needs. And a spiritual teacher for the body can look very differently. You can have those who teach yogic physical practices. I'm saying it that way. I'm not saying yoga, because yoga is actually a much broader term. In the West, we've made it just about physical practices. But that aspect is really, really helpful for a lot of people to come into their bodies. And it's kind of interesting. Some people who are teaching yoga don't understand how much of a spiritual teacher they are. And sometimes people have these emotional openings in class, and that can surprise some of the teachers. Those who do understand that they're teaching a very spiritual practice and helping people open into their bodies and that awareness. They have more space, and they understand when somebody's having a clearing and then they're just crying in class, what's going on. And it's a healing. It's a healing of the body, because the body and the energy of the body carry all of our emotions and awareness and our memories throughout this lifetime and more. And so those are kind of three main types that I'll talk about. And there are different levels. And I use levels very loosely, and I encourage you to use them very loosely, but I think it can help you to have an appreciation for where the spiritual teacher is coming and where they can lead you, because I think it's also like swimming. It's like certain spiritual teachers can be able to swim out to certain levels with you. And so they can get out to 10 feet deep water. And then like the next one will take you out to like 400 feet deep water. And the one after that can take you out over the abyss of the ocean, and you will be fine with that person. And then eventually there's that part where the spiritual teacher lets you have your own swim, where there are certain things that you do have to swim on your own. But not as much as I think as people think. You don't have to do as much on your own as you think you do. But there are still certain parts that you do. And that's an interesting balance. And the more aware a spiritual teacher is, the more they understand that balance and can help you with it. But of course, as I said, it's all coming back to you, coming back to that awareness. The more awake I am working, somebody is that I'm working with, the more I'm like, well, what do you think? So a level 1 spiritual teacher, as I said, I'm using these very loosely. Don't hold on to these terms. It's just to kind of help give you a sense of things out there. The level 1 teacher is kind of a guardian of a spiritual tradition. These are important. These people help protect the tradition to a certain degree. And it's not like saying, mine's the right way. It's more like continuing the tradition, remembering the rituals, passing them on, teaching them to others. Those are important things to have to help maintain lineages and, carry on these practices. And it's a very beautiful thing. They tend to be very different than some of the other spiritual teachers who've actually had a big opening or an awakening. And so when you come to the what I call roughly level 2 spiritual teachers, they've had something happen where like they got a glimpse of something, the window popped open. But it's usually within a specific tradition or situation. So that's usually how they teach from it. So if somebody had a really big opening in like a yoga practice, they'll tend to be yoga teachers and kind of teach from that methodology. And they don't really necessarily look outside of that particular venue to other traditions as much. They might, but it's usually very focused on that and in kind of recreating that situation for other people to have similar experiences that they had. The level 3 teacher is a much more integrated teacher, and they start to teach from multiple traditions, and they can integrate them all. And they're integrating more across heart, body, mind, and soul. All that stuff, starts to come together more and more, and they tend to be very powerful, charismatic people that, just really start to shift things just naturally from how they teach. And then the last level is kind of the masters. They don't have to really do anything. They just kind of show up. And there's just this energy that exudes from them, and things move. And that doesn't mean that, the student doesn't have things that they have to do. It's just things will start to move naturally inside, and that's them. That's their own awareness that is naturally interacting from the energy of the master. So these are some different ways to look at spiritual teachers, and it may be important to have different spiritual teachers at different times depending on what you're working on, because it will also help you to understand that spiritual teachers have limitations. There's certain things that some are better at than others. To find, the masters and kind of the level 3 teachers where things are really, really integrated tends to be fairly rare. That's just not something that's really moving around as much, at least not that I've seen out there yet. But I think, more of that's going to happen. There's a lot of energy that's shifting a lot of people. A lot of people are waking up, and there's kind of a new realm of teachers and healers that are coming to this time to help people, because there's a whole bunch of people who really want to wake up and help shift this world. So those are my thoughts on spiritual teachers. I hope that's helpful to you as you develop your path, and I hope you're enjoying these videos.